As I was saying to Patrick, I put this together in an hour, but I also knew which tools I was using. So this is going to be the opportunity for you to lean on some tools. If you come in and look really close, you can see that it is still pretty shabby. It's very suggestive of seams and detailing, and that's all you need to communicate your idea. You can keep noodling until, I don't know, you're happy with it. But at some point, you just need to be able to move on. So for this concept piece, I started out by getting a whole bunch of photos for the different elements. For you, you may want to get many more photos than I have. Like you will want to alter designs so that they are unique and you're only taking aspects of somebody else's designs or somebody else's photographs. That's a really important part, especially if this is going to be a piece of concept that is going to be on display at some point, because we need to be really mindful of creative license and taking somebody else's designs. So these are somebody else's 3D model, these boots. So what I wanted to do is purely get the structure of the bottom of them and some of the detailing, and then meld it together with another piece of fabric to create a new design, but suggesting how it could look, even if we're not getting into the specifics. If I specifically wanted to design those boots, that would be a whole subject that I'm specifically addressing, rather than a complete character look. So that's just a little bit of context about using photos. Using high resolution photos is going to be the best for photocomping. In Google, you can simply, if I go back to Tilda Swinton from earlier and go to images, you can just go to tools, change the size to large, and now it's only going to give me larger pictures of this search. You can also find them on photograph reference sites. So these are the photos that I have. In order to start to get my subjects, we can just use the selection tool. So in the selection tool, I have the object selection tool selected. I'm going to be using that one. It's pretty intuitive at getting things pretty spot on. So here you can see I'm hovering over my boots and it is telling me how my suggestion is going to look. And that works fine for me. If I want to get both at the same time, I'm just going to click and drag, and it's going to think and then grab it. So I can Command-Shift-I will invert my selection, or you can go select invert up there if you forget that hotkey. Select invert. And I'm just going to delete because I don't need that background. So what you'll want to do is go through all of your photographs, get the subject that you want. Like I want this shirt. I don't really need anything else from this photo. It's probably going to grab all of her, which is cool too, because I kind of want the pants. Command-Shift-I, delete. And I'm just going to scale that one up a bit. Move on. Next one. This is my actor's face that I want. Click on the subject and it's going to think and hopefully do a pretty decent job at getting my subject. Yep, perfect. Command-Shift-I, delete. Again, that's under select invert if you forget. So you can continue in this fashion. For this image, I particularly just want the harness detail and the folds of the shirt. So this is going to be a situation where I'm going to use a mask rather than a selection and delete. So I'm going to Command-T to transform it. I'm just going to shrink it down so it's a bit more manageable for my mask and press enter. and add a mask, which is down the bottom, add layer mask, down the bottom right-hand side. And with the mask now on there, I've got that white box. I can paint in black roughly, because I'm going to work on placing everything at the moment rather than making it too neat. I'm going to just roughly paint out the stuff that I don't need. And because it's in a non-destructive form, using that mask, I can always paint that back in, which I very likely will, because I've gone a bit too faded on the top of the harness, which I want later. So I'll just be able to use the white and paint that back in easily. So I'm just going to go through my photos, grab my selections, or apply the mask so that I have a rough cutout situation of all of my components. So this boot, I want that, invert, delete. I don't really need the jeans. This is the, I'm using this jacket, but I also wanted to just get a full body in here so that I could get an approximation of the size of my person, so I can put the different components around. So even if you're working in the way that I'm doing for mine, with lots of separate components, like a separate face, separate hands, separate legs, having a scale ref to adjust to is really important. So even though I am taking the jacket from here and the hood, it's also going to help me place everything. So for your characters, you'll probably have your photograph reference of yourself or a screenshot of a posed model. I'm just going to use this for now. And I'm going to quick selection, click on the person in the photo and get my selection. This one, invert, delete. Boom. I'm going to duplicate that just so I remember later that I want them. And I can just kind of look to it. This harness I also want, but again, I might want some of the shirt. So I'm going to use a mask for this one and then paint out using black on the mask where I don't want anything else. I'm just roughly getting things in. We've got Miss Queen over here. Again, I'm going to mask this one because I don't yet know which parts of this leather jacket that I want, but I can just do this for now. Just remember to change quickly your brush size in Photoshop. You can just use the brackets next to P on your keyboard. And this one is for later. This is an environment thing, so I don't need that at all. So that is how you quickly go about getting the components of your photos. Now we want to arrange them in a way that is scaled and we can make some tweaks to them. So this is phase one, very basic. Phase two is now placing them and maybe starting to warp them a bit. So let's do that. So I'm going to just move my boots down, move Tilda's shirt here, put my actor's face on above and shrink it so it's about as big as this guy's one. Yep. Plonk him there. What's this one? That should go over the shirt. So now you want to just rearrange your layers before you scale them up or down. Where did my boots go? Going to move the boots down, going to move that one down, shrink it, put it next door, right click, flip horizontal, because I probably want it to be that way later. I got my jacket there. And what was this one? Oh, the harness. So I'm going to bring that harness above here. So it looks like a crazy mess right now, but we're starting to place things. Right, so let's start to get rid of some of this information and piece together even further. So with my actor, I'm going to apply a mask and paint out, change my brush to a hard round brush. I'm just using hard round and soft round this whole time, by the way. And I'm going to mask out the shirt and neck because I want the neck from something else. And I don't need that hat. So I'm just going to get their face. I'm going to hide it just so I can focus. I'm going to get rid of this neck and collar a bit finer. I might actually flip this. Command T, flip horizontal. Even though I'm going over the shapes, I can always bring it back because it's masked. Command T. Oops, I was not doing it in the right spot. I did not have my mask selected. Just undo. So make sure that you have your mask selected, not like me. There we go. Flip. Drag it up. Shrink it a little. So this is purely me going through transform tool, scaling it down, using the mask. Very basic stuff. Nothing too crazy. What I want to do now is just place my shirt because I think I really need to have that as my base because I don't really know where my harness parts are going without getting the major shape down first. So I'm going to hide those and actually address my long shirt. I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to paint black into areas I don't need. Command T, and then we're going to warp this one because the angles of the shoulders are not what I want. I want them to match this angle of this person's shoulders. So I'm going to warp it. Command T, and then up near the tick and cross button, there's the warp button just next to them. And I can start to push and pull my shirt to be where I want it using that warp function. And this is just approximate. Yeah, that looks good. And now the angles of the shoulder are better. So that was just the warp tool. Command T and then press warp, which is there. Easy, right? Now I can place these harness components with a little bit more clarity. I'm going to start with this top piece because it's got a little bit more structure to it that I can follow along with. I'm going to get rid of these white shoulders. Command T. Get out of here. Warp. And I'm just going to align the pattern to the shirt a bit more so that it looks kind of cool like that. And the harness underneath, again, I'm going to warp that one because I want the picture is quite central. So the waist, the center of the torso is too central and I want it to be slightly offset. So I want to just match up the belts on this side. Push and pull it around till it's approximately in the right space. Now, I don't need much of this one. I'm going to go into my mask and paint out the top area. I'm going to want my folds later, so I'm not going to completely get rid of those yet. but we can start to blend them in. So you can very easily blend in by just using the soft round brush. So if I click on soft round, now I'm just feathering away the harsher line, and it's a bit more blended. But I still have the nice bold information there. Obviously the colors don't match, but that's going to be what we address in blending, which is very easy to do. Cool. I'm going to move that up a little. Enter. What else have I got here? The jacket. Okay, so it's a pretty major component. I'm going to bring the jacket up because I want these lapel parts to be on top of my shirt. So what I'll need to do is mask out this person. I'm going to go back to my hard round brush and get rid of anything I don't need. Using the hard round brush will give you those nice crispy edges as well. I don't need his face. Although I might keep it there just because I want to place this guy's one in the right spot. So now that I have a little bit less chaos happening, I'm going to move my face into place and adjust the scale. Monty, shrink it, rotate it, and I'm going to try and line up the ears. I feel like that's a good place to start. Like I can see the end of his ear in that below picture. So I'm going to kind of adjust the scale and position to that ear, even though, no, they're looking fairly in the right kind of direction, actually. Boom. So obviously this character is in nighttime street lighting, so the colors look completely off, but we can absolutely marry them back together in just a little bit. So I'm going to continue to mask out this guy so that I can see the hood seam, clean up some of the edges, and maybe reduce the amount of beard a bit. Actually, no, I kind of like the beard. Back to my jacket mask. I don't need this part. I'm going to get rid of that. Actually, I want to paint that back in because I want that Adam's apple. Oops, I've got my eraser on. Mask, paint back in the Adam's apple, but I can get rid of the shirt. Sweet. Already we're getting somewhere a little closer to where I want. I don't need this. I want to use my lasso tool and grab this right hand lapel, and I'm going to warp that one independent of everything else. So you can warp smaller sections because I want this to be a lot more around his body so that we don't see all of it. It's going to move it around. Oh no, my warp's gotten all crazy. Let me just fix it. It's unfixable, so I'm going to escape it, warp it, and push it more gradually this time. There we go. I also want to just straight up lengthen it, but I'm going to have to do that once I combine them and no longer have that mask because I will need to do that. For the shoes, we can obviously angle them, cut them out. So we can grab one, rotate it. Oops. Oops. Make it a little bit bigger. Grab the other one. I'm going to put this one on a different layer. So I'm going to Command X, which is cut, and then paste it. And now I've got a single boot, which I can put behind the other boot and angle it so that it looks like this person's walking forward and the other boot is behind and walking backwards, just like that. I'll just zoom in for you. So we can continue in this fashion, pushing and pulling and scaling and cutting until we have something that looks like the comp copy in this Photoshop file. So I'm going to hide my photos because I'll let you continue doing that in your own time. But you can see here what I came up with for my comp. I threw together these different images. You can see how shoddy it is, but that's okay because now we're going to blend it all together. So the colors are all wrong. This person has a deep skin tone and the hands don't match that. That's a big problem area. All of my different materials feel unsettled. How do we unify all of these components to make them feel like they belong in the same picture? We can do color matching. It is really easy. It's a few quick clicks. So let's do that. If I go into my copy pictures, because that's where I'm working now, we can so I'm just going to select my head layer and I'm going to change that one first because it's the most challenging in terms of the daytime is completely different to everything else. Everything else is day and this one I think is night with streets. So we can change that one first. So make sure that you have the layer selected that you want to change and alter the color to. It's going to match it to an approximation of whatever is beneath it. So we can just go up to image with your layer selected, image, adjustments, match color, and it's going to bring up this window here, match color. We can very quickly get some results just by ticking neutralize, and you can see that difference immediately there where it's taking away a lot of the yellow from the street lights and it's bringing in more of the cool tones that are present in the fabric, and that's already pretty good. We can tweak the luminance a bit, although this isn't having a huge difference, or we can chuck out some of the color intensity just to pull out some of those really strong street lights. The luminance, I think, will be fine the way it is. So that's just a quick tick, neutralize, okay. And we can go through our components. What's next? This leather jacket, select that layer, image, adjustments, match color, neutralize. And now I can tweak it. So I want to make the luminance a bit bigger or brighter, take down the color density. What do I want to, I want to make the color density actually higher. And now we can see that it's matching the cool tones a bit more. There's still a crazy amount of red from the actresses here, but we can clone stamp that out in just a second. So we can also adjust the amount of fade, very easy. Trench coat, image, adjustment, match color, neutralize. I don't know if I necessarily like that one as much. I think I'm going to maybe just tweak the luminance in color intensity and not do the neutralize, because that's kind of the hero component that I think a lot of the neutralizing was getting the information from. So I'm just going to make minimal changes to that one, press OK. So we can continue in that fashion, make those tweaks. So the one thing that is definitely needing to be adjusted on the trench coat layer is my hands. My hands do not match the skin tone of my actor, neither does the neck. So we can change those independently by using selection. So I've got my lasso tool. I'm just going to grab my pans very quickly.
Are you pressing shift between them?
Yeah, to grab multiple. Actually, sorry, before I do that, let's do some clone stamping because I need to repair my thumb and bring my neck down. So clone stamp, get your mask to a certain point, and then what we're going to do is combine the mask back into the layer. So it really is beneficial to do what I did and duplicate your comps before you merge your masks together. So you can simply grab the whole folder that I had and duplicate it and hide the previous one. But what I want to start doing now is actually combining my masks. So if you right click on the mask for the trench coat, I can go apply layer mask. And now the actual layer looks like this. It has erased the information that was masked away. But we need to do that in order to use the clone stamp tool, because otherwise our mask will be in the way. So to clone stamp, that is the button under brush on the toolbar. We hold Option and we can find the target. So I'm going to target this other thumb on the other side and then paint in on that side to create an approximation of a thumb. It doesn't need to be pretty. If we zoom in, we can see it looks like carnage a bit, but we will never see the picture at that close of a level anyway, so it doesn't matter, but it's filled in that gap. I can go to my neck, hold Option to target and bring it down a bit so that I have a bit more neck information. And it's matching the tones. Perfect. I'm actually going to give them a shirt because I didn't have one. I'm just going to paint it in black. There we go. Nothing too crazy. So if I go to that leather jacket that's on top, I need to get rid of that hair. I can maybe go a little closer so you can see. I tend to work as zoomed out as possible. I like to look at the image holistically rather than zoomed in. I think it's good practice to do that. Otherwise, you'll be working on detail that isn't even visible. So Option to target, and I kind of want this plain area, this plain bits of leather. And I'm going to target, paint, till there's no more hair. That looks pretty good. It's got enough grunge in it to disguise anything weird. And then I can simply erase anything that I don't really like there's a bit of an overhang from when I roughly erased. I'm just going to delete that. Something that needs to be done to blend this leather part into the jacket, because I want them to be the same thing, is simply use the eraser, set it to soft round, make it a bit bigger, too big, and just peel away at some of that information there, just so it feels a little more integrated. I don't really like the belt, I'm going to remove that. And now it feels like it's part of the jacket. Very, very quickly adjusted. I don't want I want my hood to be obvious, so I'm going to erase where my hood is. You can see that me figuring this out has resulted in losing the edge of the shirt. I can just clone stamp that back in. So clone stamp, hold down Option to target, paint it in approximately. Pretty easy, right? It just takes time. That's the thing. All of these tools are available to you. It just takes you noodling away until you're happy with it. But we need an approximation. So let's get back to that skin tone that needed changing. Now that we can actually see all of the components. I'm going to use that lasso tool, grab my first hand, hold shift, grab my second hand, and hold shift, still holding shift. I'm going to grab that bit of the neck. In the adjustments area, I'm going to use color balance first. I'm going to leave it at midtones, and I'm going to start adjusting. I think I need a bit less pink, a bit more red, weirdly, and maybe a little bit more yellow. So now I'm starting to get the warmth in the right area. I go back to adjustments. So my mask, what I had selected created a mask, by the way, which is why it's only affecting those components. You can see it's all black with only a few white parts. I'm going to grab that selection. Whoops, not that. Ugh. Oh, I'm going to grab my selection by holding down Command, not Alt. And I'm going to make another adjustment layer to continue to tweak that. I'm going to click on levels. I'm going to bring my darks down. I'm going to bring my midtones a little closer. I just need to be aware of making it too muddy. But I just want a little bit more darkness in my shadows and midtones because this is a daytime and my actor was in nighttime. So I'm trying to get rid of a little bit of that daytime appearance. So we've erased some of the pinkness. We've taken it slightly over to a darker nighttime setting. Now we just need to adjust for the actual difference in skin tone. So I can go adjustments, selective color will be fine. I'm going to go reds. And I'm going to take out some of my info. So I'm sliding down the colors. I'm tweaking it by eye until I'm happy with it. So we're getting a bit closer there. I'm going to go into my yellows and take away some of those. So selective color works in that way, exactly how it sounds. It's tweaking all of the pixels that align themselves to these categories. So it's pretty useful. Oops, I made a new thing and I forgot to have my selection. So I'm going to delete, grab my selection and use, what was I using? Selective color. Okay, so I can't remember what settings I had, but we can use these adjustments to go through and make all the tweaks we need. So what we covered in the second phase for blending was unifying some of these sharp kind of seams by using just a simple eraser with soft brush. We used clone stamp after merging our masks back in to start to meet in the middle there. We used some adjustment layers on certain selections, and we also had a layer selected and did the adjustments match color. So that's how we start to get everything neutralized so that we're working on kind of similar ground for each component. We're filling in gaps and we are blending out very slightly to get the components looking like they belong together. So this was after I spent time doing rather than saying, which didn't take me too long, but it's kind of similar there. I just did a better job at my coloring. So the blend is simply those exact tools that I just showed you. And I decided to add the fingerless gloves thing because I thought the sleeves were too short. I also pulled down the coat to make it longer, and I added these little wispy bits and cutouts just to make it look kind of cooler. I used the clone stamp to make this really wobbly but slightly different harness component. And I used the clone stamp tool to also get rid of the buttons on the jacket because I thought that the buttons made it look less sci-fi. But I kept that one up there because I thought it was kind of cool. Right, so there is no painting in here except for the gloves. Everything is using those tools I just stated. I haven't done any painting yet. It's all adjustments. It's all blending with the eraser and masks. What we can do once we're in at this point is start to create the paint over. So with the paint over, we simply want to introduce a little bit of lighting, a little bit of shadows to create further harmony with these components, because clearly there are no shadows yet that make sense to the elements that are in it. So what I want to do once I start to introduce color and light is make sure that I have a value layer that I can check back on often. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to paint bucket tool at white and change my blending mode to color. And that way I can always check in on how my tones are doing. I'm working with a fairly monochromatic look anyway, but there's going to be lighting introduced to create harmony with the really cool lighting on my actor. So that's where I'm going to introduce color. So my tones are looking pretty good. There's enough information in the areas that I want to stand out. If for any reason you feel like you want to change components of yours, you can always use the levels adjustment. So adjustment layer, levels, there's no mask because I didn't have anything selected. And we can start to push and pull. Mine's already fairly dark, but for your sake, maybe you want to bring your mids a bit brighter or whatever, or take your darks in to create a harsher shadow. And you can see that very dramatic difference already. And the levels also really helps unify everything. It pushes elements back and it brings things forward. So levels is a very powerful adjustment layer. I don't really need it for mine. I feel like it's okay. I might do a little bit of tweaking. Yeah, that'll do. And so mask, wait, that thing, this one, cool. Right, I'm gonna turn that off. When working with a concept piece, I do not recommend working with the standard white background that Photoshop will have for you. Using something pure white like this is going to mean that you're kind of doing your values with this massive amount of white there, and it's going to play tricks on your eyes. I recommend going for a grayscale background. I like to do a gradient for my one. And I did that by just simply holding down the paint bucket tool, going to gradient and changing it to gray and creating a gradient. And now there's a bit more of mid grays there in the background. It's not going to make the values and levels seem really crazy. So that's what I've done there. I've very quickly lassoed and then painted in a drop shadow just purely so that I can kind of get a bit of realism there. It is the laziest shadow ever. It was simply new layer, do a bit of a scribble underneath them, fill it in gray, and using a soft round brush, I made some of it slightly less harsh. Easy as that, but it helps a lot. You can make yours look prettier than mine, that's fine. So we now want to have some lighting shadows start to come in here. I'm going to turn off my backgrounds. I'm going to turn off my drop shadow. And I'm going to make a new layer that is everything that's visible. To do that, we go Command, Alt, Shift, E. And that has made everything that's visible into a new layer. So that was Command, Option, Shift, E. Command, Option, Shift, E. I can use that to get a selection because I want to create a group that is a mask of everything. So my lighting and shadows, I don't have to go and erase things. So I purely made that layer so that I can get a selection of everything. You can see that there's no shirt there, so I'm going to just include that. I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to add a mask, and now I have a mask of everything. I don't need that other layer anymore. I can delete it. In this group, this is where I'm going to do all my lighting and shadows. So you can see, because I had that mask, I made that selection. It's going to just apply it to that. Very useful. So you get to decide on what your colors are like. If you used that selective color on the actor's face layer, you could have tweaked, or you could tweak the colors of the lighting. So you could adjust that blue, you could adjust that yellow so that you could do something a bit different. I'm just going to follow along with that because I didn't think to do that. I'm going to start with shadows. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to drag it into that group. And I'm going to get a shadow color. So I want a cool shadow. So I'm going to use this dark indigo. I think that's going to work really nicely. I'm simply going to go to soft ground and start to place in shadows where I think they'd be. Kind of hard to see with it being so solid like this, how it's actually going to look. So I'm going to set my layers blending mode to, let's try soft light for now. Yeah, soft light looks like it's going to do something good. I can always tweak it if I don't like it. So I'm going to stay zoomed out. I'm going to start to use, actually, no, I'm not. For the sake of this tutorial, I'll zoom in a bit. I'm going to start to paint in shadows in areas where I think that they would be more present. I'm going fast. I'm being rough and decisive. I'm not being too picky. And I'm just following along with the shadows that kind of already exist in the photos, and I can tweak them at a new level. And what we've got here now is already a slightly more unified look. Very simple, a single layer, a single color set to a different blending mode. I can do the exact same thing with lighting. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to kind of approximate that color, but make it a bit brighter. And I'm going to start laying in areas where I think that light will behave, judging on how it's falling on his face. So I'm again following the pleats and folds that my photos already established, and I'm going to work them in that way. Now let's see, soft light looks pretty good. Might use the eraser and take it away in some areas, but generally we now have some pretty cool looking lights. We've got harmony with the lights that were on the face, and it was super simple. I'm going to do some interesting lights on the other side. I'm going to use inspiration from the kind of gold street light here. Make it brighter. And going to work in on the other side. To create just something a bit more controlled and something that I think will look cool. Oops, I used the select button. I'm going to set this one to soft light, and I'm going to actually bring the opacity down a bit so it's not so overwhelming. I'm going to make one more layer for highlights. I'm going to use the same blue from before. I'm just going to go in and make a really strong rim light because I think that that's going to bring it out a bit more. I'm going to turn my background back on so that I can see how it's going to look. Get a bit of bright white. Change it to soft light. And now if I close that group and turn it off and on, those 4 layers have dramatically unified the photocomp. So it's those steps. It is bringing in the photos, getting a rough selection of all of them or a rough mask of all of them and placing them, arranging them in space, scaling them down to get something that looks like, or did I tweak it? I can't remember what I did. Yeah, something that looks like, yeah, that was my one. Something that looks like this. It's all rough, it's all different colors. And then we blend it out. Oh, I've screwed up my layers. What did I do? Wait, this is how it started out over here. And then I blended it a bit more. So I blended in the materials. I revealed some of the materials in areas that I wanted it. I clone stamped some things. I match colored a bit better to get it more uniform. And then we went in with blending to create very simple shadows and lighting to help things feel more settled. And at the end, you might have a paint over that looks pretty unified. Like I said, I did this one in an hour because I didn't have a design to base it off of, so I was going rogue. You will have a bit more control with your characters about what materials you use, but the tools are quite simple. It just takes time. So you might be able to get your photocomp realized in half of a day or something. That might be pretty cool to challenge yourself to do that. As a reminder, it doesn't need to be pretty. The client will only ever see it at this holistic distance. They're never going to get you to provide a zoom in that looks like this, where there's mismatched resolution, the colors are a bit off, the blending is wacky, but they'll never see it that way. They'll always see it this way. So don't zoom in is my advice. The last thing I want to show you is dealing with perspective. So a lot of the time with organic things, you can get away with having strange perspective by using that warp tool because it's organic, it will look legit. But when we're dealing with something a bit more structured, how do we get that to be in the position and perspective that we have for our environments, for example? So if you may remember from the drawing on last week's class, we had elements that maybe you want to photocomp into. We're going to go over this again tomorrow anyway, but just in case you want to know what we're doing. I want this trunk to be positioned here because it's got all of the realistic textures that I want, but the perspective is different. We can do that very easily by scaling it, first of all, to be a little bit closer to the scale we want. So I'm going to just bring it, I'm kind of matching the front face to the front face in terms of scale. That looks pretty good. I'll zoom in. Enter. So we've got the scale looking about right. Now we can go up to Edit, Perspective Warp, and we can just draw out our box. Now we can grab each point and align it with the point of a face. So you don't have to start with any particular face. You just want to warp it to any of them. So that one's done. I'm going to drag out again. And I'm going to move this point here, and perspective warp's like, oh, you want to do that? I'll snap it for you because I know where you want to go. And I'm going to move these ones, move that one, draw again, and move this one here. And it knows I want it there. Snap that one and move this one. So we were in layout mode, which is up the top here. You can see layout and warp. We can now swap to warp. And we can place our pins in line with our line work. Now, your line work does not have to be as clean as my one. You may be aiming for your environment to have no line work at all, which is cool. It'll help with that photorealism, and we can just place it, and we can change the perspective. Super useful, because last week we were only working with a single flat image rather than something with dimension. Now I can line this up to my perspective on my wall. And now we're good. And we got it. And it looks good. And it's in perspective. Very easy. So that was just edit, perspective warp. So that is really photocomping in a nutshell. Like I said, you just need to have a little bit of patience with yourself. But it's really just a few tools that Photoshop has, adjustments, blending modes, using the soft brush, using the stamp tool, and the edit adjustments color match button. Sweet.